Hey, everybody, welcome back to the next episode of AI Unleashed. And today I have the pleasure of being joined by Jennifer Bryan, who is somebody that I have been on numerous events with, and we've spoken on stage and we've had a lot of productive conversations. But the topic for today is AI and change. So, Jen, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ash. It's fabulous to be here. I am very passionate about making sure that leaders understand the power of emotion in driving change. And so that I'm really uh, very much looking forward to our conversation today so that we can talk about exactly that in AI and change.
Absolutely. And for the people who are listening, do you want to give a little bit of an intro into the work that you do in the company that you're with?
Of course, of course. So I run my own company. I've been doing that for 14 years. I've given myself the title of Chief Empowerment Officer because that's what I intend on doing, whether I'm coaching, mentoring, advising, guiding, facilitating, whatever it may be. It's very much around empowering others to do things differently. My own company is named after my kids. It's called AB Change Consultancy. I do have child A, Amelia, and child B, Blake, and they changed my world. That is something I've, as I said, I've been doing for 14 years. I've had the pleasure really of working with enormous amount of different organizations, dominantly household names such as Microsoft, Barclays, Rolls-Royce, Atos, Mott McDonald. I've also worked in the public sector with the Home Office. I even was a civil servant once upon a time. And I've worked with other government departments and agencies and local government councils as well. And that is something that I think has enabled me to really bring a commercial and business insight that a lot of people may not necessarily have when they've worked for just one or two organizations before. I'm able to quickly adapt, understand the scenario quite quickly as to how people are behaving, what's going on, what's being hidden, what's on the surface, and what needs to be explored more because there's something, but we're not quite sure what that is quite quickly.
It's an important point, right? That work experience is a thing. And I think there are plenty of folks out there in the world at the moment who are, I say this in every podcast, and for people who are listening and wondering, yes, I have contempt for these people, but there are lots of people out there who are basically armchair warriors, LinkedIn thought leaders. They have plenty of opinions, but they don't have any work experience. And
Oh,
I think
gosh.
this thing that you've said is vital. You need to have, to some degree, whether it's in consulting or in-house, you need to have actually done things and to appreciate the complexities, the difficulties, and to have that sort of experience, that domain experience of having solved problems. So I think this is very important, the thing that you've said.
I agree with you entirely. It's why I think it's what makes my keynote talks, my workshops, and the coaching that I do in the advising as a board member that really valuable because I'm able to talk from experience, not just my experience, but I could say, I shared, this happened in this organization, that happened in that organization, this happened with this group of people, et cetera, et cetera. And that's learning from others and learning from other situations and how things have happened is extraordinarily powerful and extremely valuable, which is also why in my books and in the articles that I write, I share an enormous amount of different case studies to really bring things to life. And it's all part of that storytelling that we've talked about before, Ash, in regards to it's not about theory. Theory's great and we need theory. It's why we get the diplomas and the degrees and we read and all the rest of it. But we need to also be able to bring it to life and make it practical so that we can do things differently. Because my motto and how I got into change is from a learning development background. And I believe it wholeheartedly, there is no change without learning, and there is no learning without change. The two go hand in hand. So to enable that learning and hence enable the change, we need to be able to share those stories.
So that's a very interesting sort of introduction into what we're going to talk about during the session. So what you've mentioned about learning and change is, I would say, is probably an individual perspective. People learn and people change. From an organizational perspective, we could consider the organization as an entity, as an organism, and the organization could learn and adapt and things like that. But obviously, mechanisms are going to be different when we consider an organizational level and an individual level. And we have not only the people side of change, but we have the tech side of change, the AI revolution, the agentic revolution, and the things that we will call the machine, really broadly speaking. So all of these things need to go together. And I think as we move into 2026, 2027, we have an acceleration of the pace of change, and the implementation of the machine is to some degree displacing either headcount or traditional roles or the skills that people need, depending on the organization. So if we take a fairly broad view of change and learning, let's pick one of these things. So organizations or individuals, what do you think? So let's start with organizations, big picture. Change is one of those things which big companies do have dedicated departments, small companies don't necessarily, but change is nearly always the thing that's a constant and badly managed. So what do you think the impact is going to be of the agentic revolution on the concept of managing change in an organization?
That is a big question. I think there's several layers to that. And one of the big key elements is that when it comes to change, not all organizations, big organizations, have a dedicated change team. It many times was in the PMO office because change used to be a beginning, middle, and an end. And it was a discrete piece of work that happened somewhere over there. And as a result of that, it meant that people were more or less told what needed to do differently. They weren't necessarily brought along on the journey. The challenge is that now change is constant. I mean, Cotter's been talking about it since 1997 that change is constant, but we didn't change how we saw it and how we managed it. We still managed it as if it was a beginning, a middle, and end. No longer is feasible. That's not possible. Too much is changing in too many different areas on a day-by-day basis for all of us in our personal lives, as well as in our professional lives, and hence as well as the organization and in the world. And so as a result of that, everyone, all business leaders are having to actually manage change now, which they haven't had to do. And they're not in the position because they're change experts. They're in their position because they're an expert in marketing or expert in procurement or whatever it may be from that, whatever profession or skill set from that standpoint. But now we need to do it very, very differently. And so that's one of the big shifts that is going on from an organization arena. We need to actually skill up business leaders or everyday business leaders in change, but from that people arena. The other big shift that needs to happen, let me just backtrack. The reason why we need to do it from a people arena is because it's about the people who are going to need to do the change. It's not just a systems element where you say, right, we flip that switch on. Well, I've got to make the decision to flip that switch on because maybe I don't want to flip that switch on. And for whatever reasons that may be. And there could be psychological safety reasons for that, as well as other reasons. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we need to understand the context of how people are feeling about life and the world at the moment, because that also impacts how they interact with the change and the organization, and hence how they perform. We all know that if somebody, including ourselves, if we're not feeling great one day, we've got the flu, or we're just feeling a bit overwhelmed, or we're shattered, or whatever it may be. We're not at our best. We're not going to perform at our best. That's just a fact. Well, let's take that one instant and that one person, that one moment, multiply that just by 100. And suddenly you've got a couple of teams, or certainly a very large team, suddenly not performing very well. And that can have an impact on the bottom line of the organization. So that's the other thing that needs to really shift from an organizational perspective. First of all, it's skilling leaders up. Secondly, it's skilling them up so they understand the emotional and hence people side of the change. Then the third element that needs to really shift from an organization arena is we need to start looking at what it is that we want to be as an organization to try and tackle some of these big questions that are going on. A lot of people saying, hybrid working, is that 2 days a week in the office, 3 days a week, or we're just going to make it mandatory in the office. AI will just wing it and people can do whatever, or we'll put a caveat around it and they can only use Copilot or ChatGPT, but in this particular way, and they can't use other AI all of these questions, which I think at the moment are predominantly being asked in a micro level, whereas they're not feasibly questions that we can then really answer. If we know what it is, the kind of organization we want to be, then a lot of these questions answer themselves. Because if we say we want to be, for example, and I'm just going to espouse some what I call management spiel marketing words, we want to be the most sustainable, inclusive, blah, blah, blah organization. If you're genuinely looking to achieve that, whatever that is, then how you define hybrid working is then really defined for you, because it needs to include that vision of who you want to be, as well as AI. How you approach AI needs to feed into your vision. They all need to link and be aligned up to that. So knowing we want to be is really quite critical. And so many times organizations are, when it comes to being, they just say, oh, we want to be the number one consulting firm, or we want, and I'm like, what the heck is that? No, really, who cares on that front? What is it you want in a real sense? So there's several layers for you. It's about organizations needing to define what they want to be, so that they can start to answer more of the, what I would call micro questions that seem to be big questions, and certainly captures a heck of a lot of headlines in the media as well as on social media. And we need to actually skill up the leaders in change, but do it from a people and emotional perspective so that they can actually manage it effectively.
So I'm going to respond to that with a little bit of a chicken and egg kind of dilemma,
Okay.
right? So we are in the middle of a tech-driven revolution.
Yes.
And most organizations have a bloated workforce. Most people, generally speaking, do not add value. Organizations exist to make money. So, go on. Challenge me.
I am going to challenge you. First of all, I don't think it's just a technology-driven change. It is, and it is in the lead potentially, but ever so slightly, because there's a huge societal shift as well that's going along right next to it from that standpoint. And the pandemic has catapulted that societal shift. It was already shifting. It's just that shift, had the pandemic not happened, I was predicting before, it was going to take 10 years for us to get there, which is a nice, slow, and we can adjust and move and like, yep, it's almost like the frog in the boiling water. You don't realize you've made that shift, and because it's gradually happened. But what happened is the pandemic catapulted us, and suddenly we knew we were in boiling water as that frog. So the shift has happened very quickly, and it's going to happen even further for us as well. So there's the societal shift as well as the technology shift that is going on. And then on top of that, to compound things, there is the UN sustainability goals that is making a huge shift for organizations, because as leaders, we suddenly have to think about modern slavery. Now, I don't know of any business leaders prior to 2020 that was really thinking about modern slavery in their organizations, but now they are. Also, they weren't really thinking about loneliness in their team. Is there somebody potentially lonely? Et cetera, et cetera. So those are equally just big shifts, or nearly as big a shifts as the technology change. That's the first thing I would challenge you on. The second thing I'd challenge you on, not every organization is about making money, but it is about galvanizing money. And I use those two different because I think of charities and government. They still need the money. They still need to galvanize the finance in order to function as an organization, but it's not necessarily about making money from a profit and revenue generation.
Okay, I'll take a couple of those points. So challenge is the modern slavery piece. Organizations, and I don't know because I don't talk to organizations about modern slavery, but is modern slavery as much of a driver for organizational change as AI?
It's not a driver as much as AI is, because it's one of those things that is more hidden. It's in the dark corners. It's in the basements. So it's not driving it, but it is certainly something organizations are having to think about, because there's legislation that's come into play, and they are having to put that into place, not just with their initial suppliers, but in their secondary, tertiary, and so forth, their whole supply chain. So it is something that they are having to tackle. Is it a driver as big as AI? No, but it's certainly there from an operations and perspective.
Okay.
And
So
and it is
what
key. It is key.
so what I said,
It's because it's key how we approach our supply chains. We are having to be more responsible about our extended supply chain, whereas before we are focused much more on our primary suppliers. That makes sense.
so I remember doing this third party management piece, I don't know, when was it, 17, 18, 19, something like that, where you
Hmm.
would go into the tertiary levels of your supply chain
Yep.
and make sure that you had appropriate resilience, alternative suppliers, they were doing all the right stuff. So I'm not really seeing that as a change because this has been the case for probably, I guess, 10 years at least. The reason I say this is a tech driven revolution is because we're talking about AI and change, you know,
Yeah.
the topic.
Yeah.
But the second thing is that organizations right now have the
Mm.
opportunity, and most organizations that I'm interacting with are thinking about what should their operating model be in the
Yes.
future, including the agentic capability and the potential for people to be a part of that as well. And when I say the potential for people to be a part of that, back to my controversial statement about most people don't add value, I think in big companies, you have normal distribution of capabilities. Most companies that are hiring at scale are unlikely to be able to selectively only hire top performers. They will have a distribution. And if they have a distribution, then you have a mean point, and the mean point for an agentic system is greater than the mean for the human population in terms of capabilities. So there's an obsolescence and competitive advantage argument
Mm.
around humans versus machines for many capabilities, many tasks, and the production of work units. And the production of work units, effectively, the throughput, leads to revenue for businesses. So the conversation around the tech revolution is changing the operating model philosophy from resource utilization. We have hired 1,000 people and we need to make sure that they're busy,
Mm.
whether they add value or not, through to how do we maximize our capability for production and revenue generation. Those two things
Mm.
cause the friction, which causes the change. And this is, I said, it's a tech driven revolution. It's only possible to have this kind of discussion around change because of the tech that we have. And the tech that we have it's not being developed within organizations, it's being developed by big tech companies. And it's not even
Mm.
being regulated, right? Most of the time,
I
they're
know.
self-regulating. So you've got all of these competing issues, but basically a handful of big tech companies have released a handful of things that are causing massive organizational change. And it's really about the tech because companies are going to be considering what can we do with the tech? And therefore, what do we need from our human workforce? And mostly it's causing scrutiny on a few things. So one of those things is the productivity of each department. The other thing is the performance of people. So
Mhm.
which people do we have that frankly have been sitting around for 20 years and not doing that much? Can they be somehow reskilled, upskilled, redeployed, or exited from the business? So these are the drivers of change, which is why I say it's a tech-driven revolution, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So thinking about that, obviously challenge me, respond, right?
Right. So a number of things, and I think you've hit the nail on the head when you said that some organizations just said, right, we need 1,000 people and we just need to get some warm bodies into those chairs on that front. And I think that mindset has done us a disservice for a number of years. A, from an organization arena, and B, from an individual mindset. Because when you are put into that box, whether you had all the ambition in the world at the start of that, when you're put into that box and you continuously are put into that box and continuously put into there over and over and over and over again, you then go, well, I'm in this box now. And you struggle to have the ability to actually break out of that. And that has ramifications, particularly now with the AI coming into I mean, I think we need, to be fair, I want us to get a bit more clear on what we mean when we're talking about AI with the revolution, because AI has been around for 15 years, and we've been using AI for quite, one would say, naively for that time frame with Google Maps, with Google searches, with any other search engine, and with a load of the apps that we're doing, even music when it comes to streaming and so forth. All of that is AI. But that's not the AI think you and I are really talking about. The AI we're really talking about is much more around the generative AI or AGI in regards to things like Copilot and ChatGPT and Gemini and etc. Am I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
So,
partly the generative AI piece and partly the agentic piece as well, but
mm,
it's broadly the class of AI which has come after the release of
yeah,
GPT 3.5
yeah,
and the acceleration of capabilities in that tech space is slightly different from talking about the use of machine learning or neural networks or even deep learning, supervised learning, any of these things. So that's the revolution side is
yeah,
not only the capability in the machine, but also the democratization of access to things that can develop outputs
yeah.
very, very quickly that are
Yes.
comparable with what a human could do in months.
They are. But I think that we need to get better at how we structure, organize, and the expectations we set for ourselves and set others. So, what I mean by that is it wasn't you, Ash, it was somebody else, a tech guru, that said AI can replace 20 graduates. And I'm immediately going, but then what happens to those graduates? And it's the first thing. And the second thing, I'm going, graduates are just doing the donkey work. Then we're being fools because they shouldn't be doing the donkey work. They should actually be adding value and bringing a whole new life and vigor and perspective into the organization that's going to add value, drive us going forward. But if they're stuck just doing donkey work, then we're totally and utterly underutilizing and undervaluing what they bring to the party here. So that's second thing. Then the first thing, going back to what happens to graduates, personally, I have a big issue with that because then that means I'm doing succession planning for what I do for a robot. Well, I don't want to do succession planning for a robot. I want to do succession planning for a human. So, in order to actually enable that, we need to be looking at how we define roles differently as an organization. We need to be looking at our expectations and what we want from people and the value we want them to bring. And I would argue that that's not an unusual question for an organization, because why would you pay somebody 40, 50, 100, whatever it may be a year if they're not adding an element of value, even if it's just to go, that's still an element of value because it's something you don't have to do at the end of the day. But if that can easily be replaced by a robot, which it can, we know it, that was done, decades ago, then what value do we want that individual to have? And that's all part of what we've been asking ourselves since the start of the Industrial Revolution and enabling. And I think that has got to continue. I think we've gotten lazy over the past few decades and that we have not challenged ourselves in asking that question more. And now with AI, we've got to challenge ourselves that question a lot more. And we need to get smarter with it. I think we still need those 20 graduates myself. I know you're going to disagree on that. I still think we do. But I think how we use those 20 graduates needs to change significantly. I also think, this is going back to your first question in regards to organizations, we as an organization, we need to look at how we employ people differently. And I'm going to refer to Ricardo Simler on that. So his most recent book is called The 7-Day Weekend. And I've read the majority of his book. And what I found quite startling is that I didn't think is as revolutionary as a concept as the title suggests, because it just suggests that you can go off to the beach on Monday because you've done some work on Sunday and things like that. So the 7-day weekend is how I think most people who have their own organizations themselves and in a lot of different positions are already operating. They might do just 2 hours on a Monday and then go off do the shopping or the this, that, the other, because that's a bigger commitment day from a personal arena for whatever reason, whereas Sunday isn't so much. And so they'll do a bit more on the Sunday and this, we chop and change our days a lot more. But the difference is with that, or the more revolutionary element, so that works for those of us who've got our own companies or even maybe very small organizations. But if you try and translate that to a big corporation like a Rolls-Royce or a Microsoft or a Gartner or whoever, fill in the blank, that's not a contract, a permanent employee contract that is well known or written or I think even produced. And I think that's what needs to change. I think there is to some ways, a discourse in how people are approaching work if they're not in a big corporation versus how it's approached when there is a big corporation. And I think the big corporations need to actually shift how they practice in employment and really throw open the door and the types of contracts that they offer instead of it being 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, blah, blah, blah. It needs to be. It's 2 days a week, and yet you're still at the same salary, or maybe it's 10,000 less, or it's 5 days a week technically, or it's 40 hours a week, but when you do those 40 hours is completely up to you. Or so long as you achieve these things, these are the objectives that need to be achieved. So long as if you can get those objectives achieved, which is what Ricardo Similar talks about, you can do that. If you are able to do that in 2 hours versus 7 hours, then do it. Do it in the 2 hours and go off to the beach, Whereas, because if you are an organization and you've done it in the 2 hours, and as he puts it, and then you start to do even more, you're actually, as he calls it, and I totally agree, you're actually creating more problems because suddenly you're producing more than what actually we needed. And it's beyond the target. And I'm not saying just do the target, but you're going beyond the extra 10% of that target. You're going to 25 or 40. Now you're creating a whole slew of problems downstream from that. So I think as an organization, we need to get smarter with how we employ people within corporations. And if we say, this is what you need to achieve and you achieve that, brilliant. That's exactly what we needed. Have fun with whatever rest of your time. Or if it takes you 7 hours to achieve that, then it takes you 7 hours to achieve that.
Broadly, I don't agree. And so the reason I don't agree is that everything that you've said from the book, I agree with the thing that you said, that is employers and organizations need to get smarter about how they deal with people, right? Absolutely. 100% agree. Everything you said about the book is grounded in an archaic view of utilization of mediocrity. So if we were to say we have people that achieve tasks, they do thing that is throughput or output, that's an assumption, because that assumption is the very thing that's being challenged in the agentic revolution, where we say it's going to be digital employees that will do the throughput mostly. We're not talking about factories or hammering things, because that's a robotics question rather than an AI question. But we have, in the knowledge economy, we have agents that are going to do the throughput, and we have human beings that are going to be effectively the overseers, the organizers, the builders of systems. Organizations are going to be structured with systems. Now that's that's the modern view in 25 and 26. If we take that view, then we by default cannot have the argument around somebody is employed to do a task.
I think it's not the task, it's the objective. And I personally think it is much more around the relationships with people. And that's the value that we bring as human race, is we can understand relationships and that much more. Yes, there is an argument. They're working on trying to get AI to really understand those empathy skills, but it's not there yet. It's not going to be there, my understanding, and I could be wrong, but my understanding, it's not going to be there for quite some time. And even when it does, a lot of people are going to feel more comfortable still having that human interaction, because something that the pandemic has taught us a whole host of different things. But one of the things it taught us is our internal intrinsic need for human connection. Just doing it on screen isn't enough. It doesn't fulfill us the way that in-person interaction fulfills us.
Yeah. You're right.
And as a result, I think personally, yes, I agree, AI is going to be even better at doing the task, the thing. whatever it is. But humans are going to be responsible, not just building the systems, but having the relationship to enable the different things to connect and be and work and to bring that community and connectiveness together. And it's the relationship building that is really quite critical. And that's something that we need to be building those skills with our graduates a lot more. There's a whole host of different studies out there how the, Gen Z and Gen Alpha that's actually skills that they struggle with because they've been doing things so much on screen and they're so much better at doing this, and they'll text each other. They're sitting right next to each other and they'll communicate through text rather than turn and talk. And I know with my kids, they sat there and go, "Oh, you want me to phone grandma?" Yeah, phone her, dial the number and phone her. They just think it's all this. We need to build those skills back up and enhance the ones because we're all not brilliant at it. We'll all shy away from it more often than not. It's why we latched onto voicemail. It's why we latched onto, "Ooh, yeah, tell me who's calling so I can decide if I want to talk to them or not." You know, it's all of those different elements. We need to continue building those skills more, and we need to really focus in on those skills because it's that I think is going to really take us forward. And hence, and to do that and build those relationships is where emotion then comes hugely into play.
Right. Last point, last challenge, last question is penultimate is that I agree with this stuff, right? People are social creatures, but the view of that you were talking about this book, the view of we can incentivize people to complete activities and then manage their own time more effectively. If the human worthy activities are relationship building and social interactions, to some degree, you cannot partition those into discrete, finite units of work. So the concept of having a reduced week is never going to be achieved because these tasks are never done, right? They're ongoing tasks. They can never really be deemed to be complete.
Well, there is an element of when is it complete, but it's about achieving certain things. So, for example, because I had this argument a long, long time ago with a manager on, to a degree, this exact arena. You're right in the idea that a relationship there's not an ending. Well, sometimes there is, but typically there's not an ending to building a relationship. But there will be certain things that you're trying to achieve with that relationship. And that is where the journey really comes into play and why I describe AI, as you said, a tech revolution and the biggest change going on. To me, it's a journey and it's a learning journey. And when there's a journey, there's lots of pit stops along the way. You're never at the end of your learning journey, but there are lots of moments where you you pause, you go, "Oh, I just did that. I just achieved that. I just learned how to do that better. Wasn't that fab?" And then you keep moving on. Putting that into context with people and things in organizations. I'm going to use the example. I was working, I'll share this. I was working with the central government department. I was a civil servant, and it was a time for the coalition government, and we had a load of cross-government work streams going on, and I was involved in several of them because of the position that I had in this organization. And we were working very hard to try and actually break down all the silos that happened at that time across central government, from a contractual arena, from programs perspective, all in the learning space. That meant I had to build a load of relationships that none of my predecessors and none of my colleagues were really did on that front. And when it came to my performance review, the manager's like, "Well, I wouldn't say it's that, we were doing the 9-box grid." And so forth. He said, "Yeah, you've done good, but it's not as good as how you've said it." So, well, I disagree with you. He said, "Well, it's just relationship. How can you quantify that?" I said, "I can quantify it very easily in the sense that because I built the relationship with so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so at such and such, I was able to actually, because of the work that we did in the cross-government workstream that I was part of, instead of us going to procurement and doing RFPs for all these different programs that we've now implemented across the board, which would have cost us actually 3.5 million pounds just from a procurement arena, because we just implemented 8 different contracts. I was able to piggyback and choose what they've done that fit and choose which one fit our needs, and hence just do an addendum. And I just saved us 3.5 million pounds as a result of that relationship building. Now, my relationship building with so and so and such isn't done, because I'm going to be looking at what else we can do. But that is a very big concrete moment that has been achieved from that. So that would be my penultimate answer is we're on a journey. And I think we've looked at work and change as if there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. We look at what we have a beginning of the day at 9 and we have the end of the day at 5, and we don't do anything beyond 5. That was traditionally where we're at. We go to school, then we go into a graduate program to an organization, then we work for X amount of years, and then we retire and we don't work anymore. All of those norms, all of those boundaries that we have put upon ourselves in regards to work, as well as organizations, and organizations have created then the rules of engagement based around those, need to go. We need to actually strip all those boundaries away and look at it all as if we are on a journey, because we are. And instead, look at things of different stages in our lives. There might be a point when I'm 30 and I want to take 5 years off because I want to go and travel while I can, or I want to go and do this before I'm physically not able to and still feel as if I could come back and contribute to whatever it is I want to contribute to. Or maybe I want to, when I've worked for X amount of years, I'm not going to retire, but I just want to reduce what I do. And that way I have more time to do blah, 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 to volunteer, to be with the family, whatever it is. But we need to strip away these boundaries that we've set ourselves and created for ourselves. We've created these boundaries. We've created these rules. We've restricted ourselves. And then we blame organizations or other people for the restrictions, but we've done it, and we've done it collectively. And what I'm saying is now we need to let them all go, get rid of the shackles, and actually recreate and redefine.
I love it.
How's that?
Let go of the shackles of the past as
Exactly.
we move on our journey towards freedom. So, in the spirit of this being a journey, I said that was my penultimate question. My last question is, I ask the same thing of every single person who joins me for a conversation. And that is, yeah, we do have a journey in front of us. What does the future look like? Is it for you? Are you optimistic and there is a utopian future in front of us? Are you pessimistic and there is a dystopian future in front of us? Where do you sit on this utopia-dystopia spectrum?
I'm on the fence. And I'm on the fence because I think a lot of that is going to be determined about how much we let go of the shackles and how much we bring some, I will say sanity, but it is rules, it is legislation around how we treat each other. And that's treating AI and how we legislate around that, and hence the impacts that it has on us as individuals and on us as a society. We've had a very, call it cowboy approach, cavalier approach, winner takes all. It's all about the winners, forget the losers, whatever. We need to decide, do we want to be compassionate society, a world where there's a place for everybody, whatever that is? Or do we want to just make a very divisive society where if you are XYZ, you'll have it all, and if you're not, you won't? And it's back to feudalism style. That will determine whether it's, I wouldn't say utopia, but pleasant versus dystopia, and I think and I know that sounds quite flippant, but I do think it's very real. I know my daughter, for example, believes very much that there's a dystopia coming our way. And And she's been quite adamant about that for a long time. So, and she's not alone. Her whole generation that's one of their biggest fears is the dystopia, and why a lot of them actually don't like AI at all and don't want to have anything to do with it. But that's practically impossible these days. So I think we've got a big decision to make. Do we want to be compassionate or do we want to be feudalistic?
Love it. I think I've made my decision already.
Okay.
So for me, it's on the dystopian side. And the reason is that I think we have a lot of challenges, we have a lot of capabilities. And because generally speaking, we exist in a capitalist society, the chances of every human being making the decisions that are required to be a utopia are very small. And I think it's very much more likely that we will have some elements of chaos, displacement, some elements of things that happen that don't necessarily benefit society, but they benefit the capitalist model. Faith in humanity, right? So I think I err towards the dystopian side, not because that's the way it should be, but that's what I think will happen. So on that bombshell, right, we can, if you're listening to this, first of all, thank you so much, Jen, for this time that we've spent together. I don't know how old your daughter is, but maybe she wants to be on the podcast. Extend
Oh,
the invitation. It would be nice to hear from the dystopian new generation.
well, she's at uni. She's in her final year at uni and comes
Yeah,
home today for the holidays. So I'll
of course.
ask her. I'll ask her. But
Yeah.
no, thank you, Ash, for this incredible opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I hope it's been very insightful for your listeners and it's given them a different perspective and some food for thought, as they say.
Amazing. So, for those of you listening, don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Don't forget to follow on Spotify. And of course, follow us both on Instagram. All of Jen's social channels will be in the comments or the caption of whatever platform we're looking at. You can find this stuff on LinkedIn as well, of course. It's up to you. Make a decision. Are you going to sail across the seas of the AI revolution like a rudderless ship, or are you going to take charge of your own development and manage the change towards a utopian society that we all need to be part of? Make those decisions. Don't forget to follow and stay tuned for the next episode.